All right, today we are going to deconstruct one of the most fundamental skills in any organization, decision making. We tend to think of it as this super logical, straightforward process, but the reality? Oh, it's so much messier, way more complex, and honestly, a lot more interesting than you might think. So, think about the last big decision that was made where you work. How'd that go? Well, according to researcher Paul Nutt, a staggering 50% of all decisions made in organizations ultimately fail. Yeah, half of them. That's just a wild number when you stop and think about all the time, the money, and the pure effort that goes into them. And that 50% failure rate, well, it just begs the question, right? Why is there this huge gap between what we want to happen and what actually happens? To get to the bottom of that, let's start by taking a look at the ideal, the perfect model we're all kind of chasing. This brings us to what I like to call the perfect decision myth. This is the way we're all taught decisions should be made. It's the textbook version, the supposed gold standard of rational, clear thinking. And here it is, the normative model. I mean, it looks perfect on paper, doesn't it? It's this clean 5-step process. You figure out the problem, you brainstorm some solutions, you do your homework on the options, you evaluate them to find the absolute best one, and then you put it into action. It's logical, it's linear, it seems totally foolproof. So why does it fail us so often? Well, it fails us because we don't live in a textbook. We live in the real world. That normative model is a fantastic ideal to shoot for, but it almost never reflects the messy, constrained, and very, very human reality of how we actually make our choices. So the first big crack in that perfect model is a concept called bounded rationality. See, unlike a computer, we just can't process every single piece of information out there. We're limited by our own brains. Not to mention all the practical stuff, like not enough time, not enough data, and let's be honest, probably not enough coffee. We try to be logical, but we are always working within these very real boundaries. And because of those boundaries, we can't really find the perfect, optimal solution. So what do we do instead? We satisfice. It's a brilliant term, really. It perfectly describes how we operate. We don't search for the single best option out there. We search for the first one that's simply good enough. We're not looking for the sharpest needle in the haystack. We're just looking for one that's sharp enough to sew with. And what about our gut feelings, that intuition? Well, it turns out it's not just some random mystical thing. Researcher Herbert Simon argued that intuitive decision-making isn't illogical at all, it's analogical. What that means is, when we face a new problem, our brain instantly and unconsciously scans its massive library of past experiences. That hunch you get, it's just your brain recognizing a pattern from a similar situation you've dealt with before. It's a mental shortcut based on expertise, not magic. Okay, so we've seen just how complicated an individual decision can be. But what happens when we add more people to the mix? I mean, we usually assume more brains means better outcomes, but that's not always true. Sometimes it leads us straight into a pretty nasty trap. And that trap has a name: groupthink. This is what happens when the social pressure inside a group to just agree becomes so powerful that it completely steamrolls any realistic, critical thinking. The group's desire to get along becomes more important than its desire to find the right answer, and that can lead to some truly disastrous, irrational decisions. And the warning signs are, well, they're probably going to sound familiar. Ever been in a meeting where everyone seems to be on the same page, but you can just feel the unspoken doubts in the room? That's the illusion of unanimity. Or how about when someone finally speaks up with a concern and they get quickly shut down? That's direct pressure. We start censoring ourselves to avoid rocking the boat, and pretty soon you've got mind guards who protect the group from any challenging new info. It's a powerful and really dangerous dynamic. Phew, okay. We've looked at the myth, we've seen the messy reality, and we've walked through the traps. So, how do we actually get better at this? How can we use the power of a group without falling into the very pitfalls that groups create? Well, a fantastic framework for this comes from Randy Hirakawa and Dennis Gorin. Their functional theory argues that a group's success isn't really about who's in charge or everyone's personality. It's all about whether their communication serves a few critical functions. It's like a powerful antidote to groupthink. So this theory breaks it down into 5 key things for a healthy debate. First, does everyone really understand the problem? And have you set clear criteria for what a good solution even looks like? Then it's about generating realistic options. And this is crucial, rigorously looking at the pros and the cons of each one. The research is super clear that 2 things matter most: getting that problem definition right at the beginning, and being willing to actually critique the alternatives. Groups that do that, they just make way better decisions. Now, this is really interesting because it shows two different philosophies for why getting people involved actually works. On one hand, you have the effective model. That's all about feelings. It says participation makes people feel valued, and happy employees work harder. On the other hand, you have the cognitive model. That's all about data. It argues that the people on the front lines have critical information that leads to smarter decisions. The big takeaway here? The best approach probably uses both. You want that data-driven input from a team that also feels genuinely heard and respected. And all of this brings us right up to today, where there's this powerful new force that's totally reshaping how we make decisions: technology, and specifically big data. As the author Ian Ayres puts it, we're seeing a massive shift happen. Choices that for centuries were left to human expertise and that gut intuition are now being handed over to these incredibly sophisticated algorithms that can process just enormous amounts of objective data. Just think about it for a second. Big data is already a huge part of the competition in pretty much every industry. It's helping to decide everything from marketing campaigns and how we grow our food to medical diagnoses and even outcomes in the criminal justice system. That perfectly rational optimizing model that we humans really struggle with, well, that's exactly what computers are built to do. Which leaves us with a really provocative final question to chew on. As algorithms and data start making more and more of our logical, data-driven choices, what's the new role for our uniquely human traits? Where does our bounded rationality, our clever shortcuts, and our hard-won intuition fit into this new world? That, right there, is the big challenge for the next generation of decision makers. Thanks for watching.